Hey, everybody. Happy Saturday. I hope you're all having a fantastic weekend and, yeah, enjoying what life is currently offering you. And here on Aquarius Rising Africa, where we definitely share a lot of inconvenient truths, we have again with us our resident Dr. Jerry Marzinsky, who assures me he's not a doctor, but here he is, and our mental health expert. So, for those of you who don't know who Dr. Jerry Marzinsky is, well, check in the comment section. Thank you, Lisa D. Always the hostess with the mostess. How can I not be when there's like awesome people around, right? So, yeah, he's an expert on schizophrenia, mental health issues, and speak about how entities, well, how schizophrenia is not hallucinations, but actually entities. And we've proved this amply, or Dr. Jerry has. We've actually just had a very interesting conversation where he's made some more interesting discoveries on this. So, without any further ado, ta-da. Hello, Jerry.
Hey, glad to
I'm
be
very
here.
happy you're here. Last week it was me. I never had internet last week. This week it was almost you.
I didn't get to comb my hair this morning, so I look like a mess.
Jerry, you're so funny. You look great. Ladies in the chat, please just reassure our gentleman. I don't even want to say guest because you're like a co host. My co host, Jerry Marzinsky, that he looks exceptionally handsome today. So, welcome back, Jerry. So, I haven't seen you for a while. You've been off gallivanting to all sorts of places in the world. Where have you been?
Where did I go? Well, went up to Colorado for a week.
Was it cool?
It was a lot cooler than it is here in Tucson.
Well,
Still got
what's it
warm
like
during the
there?
afternoon.
My feeling around that is like very open. It's like open with lots of horses.
Oh yeah, it was very open. Yeah, my friend's house where we stayed, you could see, like 75 miles across, all the way across to the mountain range, to the Colorado mountains. So distances are very deceiving. You know.
Yeah. Well, we're happy to have you back and chatting to us about some disturbing topics, but always having solutions, right?
Well, I
So,
don't know if we have great solutions, but we have some. The most interesting thing that came around recently in working with the schizophrenics is there's a small group of us Mace therapists who are working with schizophrenics. And they're the most difficult population for us to work with because they're, I would say they're the most damaged. Virtually all of them have severe trauma. So we can go after that trauma and we can negate that trauma with Mace. It doesn't always get rid of the voices. Matter of fact, I think only in about 15% will it get rid of the voices, but it does weaken them. So we found that interesting. And
but can I just chime in here about that? Because I don't believe it would get rid of the voices maybe after one session, because what the recipient has to do is literally retrain their nervous system. So, of course, especially if the nervous system, let's say, has been programmed in that way, and that's all it knows. And now the mace would then literally start reprogramming or deprogramming, right, that nervous system. But it's still going to want to default back to that from time to time. So
no,
every time it defaults, one really has to go back.
I don't think it has a whole lot to do with the nervous system. It has more to do with the spirit. So there are two things going on. Is the voices are caused by negative entities. These are
Yeah.
beings that are parasitic and they're negative. So you could call them evil spirits, like Swedenborg talked about. So that's where this kind of came about with a clinical psychologist by the name of Wilson Van Dusen, who was also a Swedenborgian. Okay. Now, Swedenborg was a Christian mystic who lived some 300 years ago. He was the chief mining engineer for the Queen of Sweden. He's one of the top scientists of his day. And at the age of 50, he could also speak to the dead. He was psychic, so he could see things that were happening in other places. So he had a mixture of those two traits. After making the Queen of Sweden a lot of money with mining inventions and patents, at the age of 50, he reported that Christ showed up to him and said, okay, drop all this scientific stuff. I'm going to give you access to heaven and hell. And I want you to go there and speak to the residents of both and write about it and bring that back and publish books so the people of Earth will know what these things are about. Okay? So he did, and he was given access to heaven and hell. He was able to go speak to people who had passed over. And he proved that. There was one lady who was the wife of a big silver maker in Sweden, and her husband made this huge silver set for some rich person in Sweden, and he passed away before he collected the payment for that. So she was single with kids, and she didn't have any money, so she didn't know where the receipt was for that silver set. So she went to the person who bought the silver set and said, listen, you didn't pay us. And the guy said, I'm not paying you until you show me the receipt, that I was the one that ordered it. So I think he was trying to swindle her, and she didn't know where that receipt was. So she heard that Swedenborg could speak to the dead and go visit different people on the other side. So she went and begged him, said, listen, this is my situation. Would you go talk to my husband and ask him where that receipt was? Okay. So he did that, and he came back and he said, okay, it's behind this false drawer in his desk. So they went to the false drawer in his desk and took it back, and there was the receipt. There was another time where the Queen of Sweden, who was having an affair with an enemy of the Swedish state, one of the enemies of the Swedish state, he left her some kind of message, but he died before she could get it. So she asked Swedenborg, she said, would you go visit him and ask him what was in that message? So he did that for her, and he came back and he said, okay, I got what was in the message. And this is all documented. And he went and he told the Queen, I got the information you wanted. And she said, okay, well, tell me. And he said, no, I can't tell you in public, not in front of your court. And she said, I have no secrets from my court. And he said, no, I'm not going to tell you in front of your court. So he went and he whispered whatever it was to her, and she fainted on the spot, fell on the floor. And we don't know what he said to this day, but it's documented that happened. There was another time where he was at a dinner in Stockholm, and he looked at one of the recipients, one of the people in the dinner, and he said, your barn is about to burn down. You better get back there right now. So the guy ran back to his barn, and just as he opened the door, a cow knocked over a lantern and started a fire. Right. So he had all these precognitive skills. So he reported Christ or kind of told him, okay, knock all that stuff off. I'm going to give you access to heaven and hell. You go talk to those people there. And then he would write about it, and he talked about meeting some of the Catholic bishops in hell, and other people there. So while he was in hell, he would talk to these evil spirits and he would describe them in his writings. Okay. And they were similar to the spirits that Christ drove out of 23 times in the Bible. He was mentioned driving evil spirits out of the body of people who were inflicted, which would have been diagnosed schizophrenic back in those days, based on their behaviors. So what happened, there was a clinical psychologist named Wilson Van Dusen working in a state mental hospital up in Ukiah, California. And he was working with schizophrenics like I was, only he retired before I found what I found with schizophrenics. And I read his book years ago, talked about the presence of other worlds, and he was talking about the presence of other worlds in schizophrenia. Okay? But he didn't call these things entities. He consistently kept referring to them as hallucinations, which is what psychiatry referred them to. But when he described them as entities. So he didn't want to run afoul of the system, okay, and get his license pulled. But his descriptions of them were the same as Swedenborg's descriptions of evil spirits. So he treated them as such, and he would talk to them. He was trying to find out what they were consisted of, and he tried to make friends with them. Okay. But that didn't get him very far because they were consummate liars. They never tell the truth about anything. So there was one test. So there was when that incident where they were crackling in my office, I spoke about that in other sessions with you, where the progression was, I found a series of patterns that these voices consistently ran. Okay, there were like more than 23 of them. Hallucinations don't run patterns. Okay, so then I started wondering, what do you do? What happens if you interfere with these patterns? Okay, so at that time I was working in the state prison, and I had a group of schizophrenics who agreed to tell me what the voices were telling them in real time. Okay, if I would help them as much as I could. So we had an agreement going, and there was like 12 or 15 of them all the time. And so they started telling me about what these patterns were like. So they were the operational definition of these patterns. Though they were consistently negative, abusive, and destructive. They were anti-religion. They hated the Bible. They hated Jesus. They hated talk about Jesus. They hated the person praying. They hated the person going to church. What kind of hallucination would do that? What kind of hallucination would be consistently negative? I mean, hallucinations are unpredictable. There's some positive, negative, neutral, negative, all over the place. You can't predict them. These voices created and fostered negative emotion. They would energetically drain the victim. So after they attacked the victim, the victim didn't have any energy. Okay. So we had like 23 of these patterns that we'd found. And I started wondering what would happen if we interfered with them. Okay. So I would give these prisoners homework and things that I thought would interfere with the voices. And after a short while, they were coming back reporting the voices didn't like it. They didn't like doing it. They didn't want them coming to my office. They didn't want them cooperating with me. They didn't want them talking to me. They would torment them all the way to my office, screaming and hollering, giving them headaches. But what was interesting is none of those prisoners quit coming, which was interesting because they were just as interested in what these voices were as I was. And they would ask them themselves. They'd ask them, they'd ask their voices, what are you? Who are you? And the voices would report, we are you. Okay. And what I found interesting later on was that these voices didn't sound any different from the schizophrenic's thoughts. So there wasn't any when they came into the head of the schizophrenic, there wasn't any we are the voices and no voice tone change or anything like that. It was the content that changed. It changed into negative, anti-religious, awful stuff. You know, it's like you're ugly, you're stupid, you're worthless, you're crazy, you're nobody likes you, everybody's faking, your parents don't even like you. Negative stuff like that, and it was consistently negative, and it was composed. A lot of it was of lies. Okay, they would just make up lies to for the schizophrenic that they would keep telling them. And I'd ask these guys, I go, you know, they're liars, right? And they go, yeah, for the most part, we know they're liars. And then I asked them, well, why do you believe them? And they said, because they're so damn believable, was the answer. Okay. So as I interfered more and more with these patterns, these patients keep coming back and saying, they don't like us coming here. They don't like you. They don't want us working with you. You know, and these guys didn't know one another. Okay? So then one day, one of them came to my office. I don't know how he got into the office because I didn't send him a pass, and it was in the medical unit. There were guards up front. So he knocks on my door, and I'm like, I'm wondering, how'd you get in here? And he goes, the voices want to talk to you. And I said, they want to talk to me personally? He said, yeah, they want to talk to you personally. That had never happened before. It was always went through the patient. You know, the voices would tell them things and you know, tell them, you know, he's stupid, he's crazy, don't listen to him, don't come here. And then they would call me names and try to insult me, and I'd tell them, you know, go stick your head in the toilet. But it always went through the patient. Okay, it was never direct communication to me or to them. So this was the first time that happened in about 20-25 years. So I was taken aback, and I let the guy in and said, okay, have a seat. Closed the door, and I said, what do they have to say? And these words came out of his mouth: you have no right to interfere with our way of life. That blew my mind. I mean, because my denial system was already on the verge of caving in. I mean, and I think anybody else who was investigating this as much as I did would have already come to the conclusion that these things were entities. But there was a part of me that didn't want to believe that and kept denying it and denying it and denying it until my denial system just was in shambles. And then that was the straw that broke the camel's back. Right. And I knew at that point that they were entities. And then I told the client, I said, well, tell them this. And he responds back immediately. He says, I don't have to tell them anything. They can see you. They can hear you. You know, you can talk to them directly. And that took me back because I didn't think that was possible. You know, I thought it always had to go through the client. So after that, it was I was shook up. I just closed my office and just stared out the window for a while. I'm like, where's this going? You know, I didn't want to believe in demons. I didn't want to have anything to do with them. And this just, my denial system just caved in. I was in shock. But I didn't stop working with these guys. So maybe a month or two later.
Can I just ask you something?
Yeah.
You've said something very interesting there, which I haven't actually heard you say before, is that, you know, even your denial system, right, came tumbling down. I think that's actually a very interesting mirror because, you know, having seen what's capable and what these voices and entities are capable of doing and saying, and the power and the influence that they wield over their host bodies, right, is huge. I mean, it is absolutely enormous, and we see that more and more. I'm interested, just as a little segue, yeah, if you don't mind, how did that change your perception on what was happening also within, obviously you were obviously no doubt taught traditional ways,
Yeah.
right, of
Yeah. So I
medicine
had to
and what have you.
overcome that. It was years and years of
How did that happen for
voice.
you?
Uh, when in that instant, when I came to that conclusion, I went into shock. I sat there the rest of the day. I closed my office. I canceled all my appointments, and I just sat there staring out the window. I mean, and there was nobody I could talk to about this. The only people who understood it were the schizophrenics themselves. And I was starting to wonder whether I was starting to get crazy talking to the voices of schizophrenics. You know, it's
I
like,
was about to ask that because let's analyze this for a minute, right? I mean, in order to work with people who have that experience going on in their lives, you have to be able to identify with them on some level. And that's why I think the best healers are the ones who've experienced what the person or the people are going through and actually have that real life experience, right? Or lived experience, but also have the ability and capability to take yourself out of it after that, right? Or at the end of the day. And I think that more than anything for me is what I see here. And it's like you worked with these guys for so long and had these one traumatic or traumatized individual after the other that had no control over their body, literally, right?
well,
So
their minds
suddenly,
for sure.
well, their minds would then make them, I mean, the voices would then get them to do crazy things, I'm sure. Like a lot of criminal activities
Well,
would actually,
yeah. Yeah, matter of fact, it was very interesting working in the prison because the voices in some of these guys would tell them when they ran out of meth. A lot of them were drug addicts. When they ran out of
yeah,
meth, the voices would tell them where to go and when to be there to get more meth. And they would
exactly,
show up at that place, and some stranger would come out of nowhere and go,
exactly,
"Hey, you want some meth?" There were others that were robbers, you know, and the voices would tell them which houses to rob, when to go in there, when the people in the house were up, and where to run. So that there was one that reminded me. He said he was robbing this one house. The people got up. The voices told him they're up. Get out of the house. And then the voices told him the police have been called. So he jumped out the window and he went to run down this alley to the left. And the voices told him, no, don't go down there. The police are coming up that alley. Go down this other alley and go hide in a trash can, one of these big dumpsters down that alley. So that's what he did. And he's hiding in the dumpsters. The police walked by that dumpster. And as soon as they got by, the voices are telling him, okay, now get up quietly out of the dumpster and run, you know, get out of there. And he told the voices, he said, they're still too close. And the voices insisted, no, you go now. So he got out of the dumpster, closes the list real quietly, and ran back to his apartment. And then once he got there, the voices said, good job. You know, they're telling him, good job. And
but
he said, not too good a job because I left all the loot back in the trash can. And they said, don't worry about it. Go there in the morning and get it.
it's, you know, again, it just shows you that it is obviously more the low vibrating entities
Mm-hmm.
that would then access traumatized people who've
Yes.
generally been traumatized from childhood, have huge pain within themselves, which then would draw, right, these negative entities towards them. And then they create, I mean, it's like it's their host body. Some of these people I know have had the same entity since 4 years old, 2 years
Yeah.
old,
Yeah. For
whatever.
decades.
And it's like become part of them already. And of course, they're very supernatural. I mean, and they have great psychic skills and abilities. They have great ability to, as you explaining here, have foresight into what the future holds. I mean, because they're supernatural. So they're
So,
not of obviously the
right.
earthly flesh,
They,
and yeah.
they're not.
So
You set up a landslide of things in my head. Is one, it's not a neurological thing. Even though they can measure the voices talking in the person's head, they can see the electronic signals, or they can see it flash just before they talk. Okay, it's not the brain that's initiating those things. It's the spirit. It's the spirit of that entity. Just like when they put those electric things on your head and they're measuring your brain waves, when you start thinking about something, there's an electrical response, but that electrical response isn't initiated by the brain itself. And that you can see that in people who've died and come back. Okay. They're on the other side. They're looking down at their body in the emergency room, and they're still thinking. They're still hearing the doctor's talk. They're still able to talk, and they don't have a brain. They're dead. They're
right,
clinically dead.
but the consciousness is still there.
The consciousness is still there. So even with Mace, it's the being that actually erases the negative identity. Okay, so when you talk about that abuse that they have, it's not programmed into their neurological system. It's programmed into their spirit. Okay, so it's like a mind virus, kind of like a computer virus. Okay, computer virus it's energetic, and so are these negative identities that Mace gets rid of. Those are negative energy. And that's what these negative entities suck off of. So, what happened when we discreated these traumas, which is done like deprogramming these traumas or deprogramming those memories, because they are energy. And they're lives. It's live energy. So what happens is when you have a trauma, the person who did that trauma is remembered as a part of that negative identity. So when somebody else, that negative identity is programmed in, say something bad happens and the person decided, because this bad thing happened, I'm a worthless person, which is one of the most common negative identities that we run into with Mace. So they got this negative identity that I'm worthless sitting up there, and it's reacting to anything that makes them feel worthless. So if somebody who's similar to the person who abused them shows up with those similar traits, that negative identity is set off like a landmine.
Activated.
It's activated, and it tells the person, this is dangerous. That person who is activating these negative traits that the abuser instilled is dangerous. So either attack them or run from them or avoid them. So that becomes like the person you hate, the kind of person you hate. And they can just walk into the room and the person can feel them. They don't even have to open their mouth. The person knows they don't like them just by almost looking at them. It's that negative identity going off. Okay. So that negative identity affects what you think, what you feel, what you say, what you do, and your general attitude toward life. And it's negative energy stuck there. And that's what these things feed off of. So when that thing goes off, it produces negative energy, and these negative entities feed off of that generated negative emotion. Okay. So it's a negative program. It's like a mind virus that can be discreated by the spirit of the person. So the spirit is positive. It's totally positive. It's what's keep us alive. Okay. And if the spirit leaves the body, the spacesuit just falls apart and disintegrates. Okay. So it's not real obvious, but in Mace, when John Mace found that negative energy moves toward positive energy. Okay. This negative identity is negative energy. When it's connected with the spirit through attention, it will discreate that negative identity and turn it into positive energy. So it's not the therapist that's doing the work. And this is the only therapy that I've seen that has a spiritual component and a psychological, psychiatric component also. The two have to work together. Without that access to the spirit, Mace wouldn't work at all. It just wouldn't work, because it's the spirit that actually discreates, with the person's intention, this creates that negative identity. So that negative energy doesn't disappear. The spirit doesn't destroy that negative energy. It turns it into positive energy and then utilizes it in a positive direction. Okay. So it takes a lot of energy to keep that negative identity caged up. It's got to be controlled. So when that trigger goes off, that thing wants to go off, and it will attack or order the person to attack other people who are similar to the person who caused that damage. That's not a entity. That's a negative identity. So it's like a program that's set to go. It's like a burglar alarm. When somebody sets it off, it goes off.
If you have enough negative identity, before long, there will be negative entities that attract.
Feeding off it. Yes.
Yeah.
Because you're talking about vibration there. You're talking about negative vibration, negative energy. And they're attracted to that. So the more damaged the person is, the more these negative identities show up to feed on them.
Exactly. And that's why, and I fully agree with you in terms of the energy and how that works. But that spiritual torture, if you will, creates the nervous system to be patterned in a certain way within the body, right? Because now all of that is literally stored within the body at cellular level and within the nervous system.
You know what? I've seen that because in scanning, you ask the person to go through their body, but it's not stored. It's stored energetically. So
within the nervous, because it becomes somatic.
I think it's a spiritual thing, because when I finish a Mace session, I ask them, okay, go to the top of your head, scan down your body for any areas that feel tense or anxious. Okay. And they do that. Okay. We turn that into an image and then have them discreate it, and it goes, and it's not there anymore. So I think it's more an energetic spiritual thing, and it could be anywhere. It could be, I had one person that they had it in their arm, in their throat, in their head, in their legs, in their feet, and it energetically disappears. So I think it's more the spirit that's damaged, because schizophrenia, it's not a chemical brain imbalance like the psychiatric mafia said. That's been disproved over and over and over and over again. And if you look at what psychiatrists are actually doing when they diagnose schizophrenia, they'll bring the patient into their office, ask them a bunch of questions about, you're hearing voices, what are they telling you, all these behaviors that schizophrenics have, and then they will issue them or prescribe them drugs. Okay. So if it was a chemical imbalance of the brain, you think they would have some kind of lab test or EEG or some kind of objective test to measure what that imbalance was in the brain, what that chemical imbalance was in the brain. I mean, if they're saying, which they are, if they're saying that the brain has a chemical imbalance and that's causing schizophrenia, then they should have some means to prove that. They should have some kind of test to determine what in the brain is out of balance, what neurotransmitters are out of balance, or by how much. And they don't. It doesn't exist. It never has. They made this up. Eli Lilly made up that chemical imbalance when they came out with Prozac back in the 70s. Completely made up. And then the big pharma ran with it, and the ivory tower ran with it, and the big pharmas and psychiatry are making trillions of dollars off of this lie. There is no chemical imbalance that they've found. There is no genetic gene for schizophrenia. It's a spiritual thing. Nobody's ever found a thought in the head, you know. So you look at the Bible, Jesus has driven 23 times he was driving these negative entities out of these plagued people, and when those entities left, those people returned to normal. Well, I'm finding that with schizophrenics also. If you can get rid of those voices by any means whatsoever, by exorcism, by deliverance, by Mace, by any means, the person returns to normal, just like in the Bible.
But the trick there then would be to make sure that those things don't return. So, of course, if you can imagine, there's the trauma in the beginning, like when they were kids or whenever it might have happened, that would have been like a break, right? Within, let's call it a crack in the energy system. So that would need to be restored.
Yes.
So
that's why I think Mace has got to be an integral part of any treatment for schizophrenia, because you can drive those things off, but if you have that negative identity still there, telling you you're worthless, you're stupid,
that's where the healing
they're
comes
going to come
in.
back.
Exactly, but that's where the work, because all of us are responsible to ourselves as well, no matter what has happened in our lives. What happened as a kid was never our fault. Let's never forget that. It was never, ever our fault. But if we're at this stage, then we need to realize we are responsible to ourselves for healing whatever it is we need to heal. And then I think, once we understand that, it makes a big difference, because once we realize and it starts with the spiritual, I agree. It absolutely starts with that spiritual torture, but then it goes into the emotions as well. So then there's that whole emotional, and that's what we were actually talking about earlier on, is that, when there's been so much trauma in a child, before they have words to name that trauma or to say what it is or to say who did it, all of that is sitting in the body, in the nervous system, and in the cells of the body. So we immediately then react. We become extremely reactive to certain things because already the programming is there before we even were able to have a thought to think about what created that. Later on,
it's feelings.
Exactly. So later on,
feelings.
Yeah. And then that creates us to be either manipulative, deceptive, psychopathic, or whatever. All of these conditions.
See, when you have those bad feelings, then bad thoughts, when they have access to thoughts, okay, those those feelings drive the thoughts.
Exactly. They then work symbiotically.
Right.
So the
you have that negative feeling, and then that negative feeling turns into a negative identity.
Exactly. Yeah. And so the one feeds the other. So it's important, that when any type of healing, and that's my point, medicine does not touch that.
No,
they work with a symptom.
Those drugs don't cure anything. They just ameliorate symptoms. They cure nothing. They don't cure depression. They don't cure schizophrenia. They just lessen the symptoms. And they're making billions of dollars every year selling these toxic drugs that do permanent damage to the neurological system with long-term use. Matter of fact, they're doing irreparable damage to the central nervous system.
Absolutely. They're just creating more damage. And that's why when we reclaim that which is rightfully ours, and stand in the truth of who we are, these things can't touch you. They bypass you then.
Well, you were right when you say we're responsible for our own mental state. where it becomes difficult is how to get to the stuff that is subconscious, that is buried.
But that's
because
why responsibility would mean that if I recognize I've been wounded as a child, or I've got issues because my criminal record dictates that, or whatever it might be, my responsibility at some point is to myself to say, I need to stop on this destructive path. I've hurt myself and I've hurt others too much. That's the responsibility. And then
you can say that all you
happens,
want.
no,
but
but
if
let
it's
me just finish what I'm
subconscious,
saying. No, but let me just finish what I'm saying, because of course, when you're not in that place of recognizing that yet, you haven't reached that consciousness yet. So you
well,
will still be on.
the prison was full of people who were messed up. They knew something was wrong with them, but they didn't know what to do about it.
But they understood enough to know there were voices in their head. And then when you came along, right? When someone comes along like you, that's what I'm saying. Not everyone has that opportunity. I get that. But when someone like you comes along and says, okay, this and this, or you get that realization within yourself, that's when you then say, okay, I need to take care of myself there. I need to do that.
Okay.
It's
And
like,
what society tells them is to go to the psychiatrist and get drugged.
yeah,
and that's
well,
what the psychiatrists are telling them, and that's what the educational system is telling them, and that's what their doctors are telling them, and they don't realize it's a spiritual problem.
Of course, I get that.
But what you're saying about taking responsibility with the stuff buried in the subconscious, that gets really hard because you can't access it. But there is a way to do it, okay? And this was taught by the Course in Miracles, that when you get upset at anything, at anybody, you're projecting that outward, okay? So if somebody pisses you off, one way you can track that back to that hidden stuff that happened to you when you were a kid that you're not consciously aware of, you go, okay, I don't like this about that person, which means you're projecting something about yourself that you don't like onto that other person, and that other person is setting it off in you. So what you can do, I mean, this takes some work, is go, what is it in that other person that I don't like about myself?
Mirror.
And it's a mirror, okay? And then you take that and you go, do I have that in me? And you go, oh yeah, I got that in me because I can see it in them. If you can see it in them, you got it in you. If you didn't have it in you, you wouldn't be able to see it in them. Okay? So you got that, you go, oh, I'm this way. And you go, well, I don't want to be that way. And then you can start working on that trait. And they will come up one after another, after another, after another. With every person that you meet that you don't like, what is it I see in them that I have in me that I don't like about myself? You can work your way back that way.
Well, that's taking responsibility.
That's taking responsibility.
That's what I mean. You know,
that's
so like
one way to do it.
Yeah, well, the minute you take any form of responsibility, it's like the path opens up then. It starts with that idea of realizing I've had 3 failed marriages.
Yeah.
And 4 of my children won't talk to me, or whatever the case might be, right? You know, maybe, and even though I might have been trying, maybe I need to try another way. And, you know, and absolutely it does begin with that spiritual awareness, that cognitive awareness that I too
something is wrong. Yeah.
And it's not just one person in the relationship, it's always 2 people. So we take responsibility for 50%, whether you are the active or the more passive participant, right? It's always taking 2 to tango. It's how patterns work. It's 2 sides of the same coin.
See, so it's not just schizophrenics that get attacked by these negative entities.
No.
Everybody does. Virtually every negative thought you have is put there from the dark side. All right.
Yeah, it's your own fear.
Swedenborg says everybody has 2 positive guardian angels and 2 negative demons assigned to them. Okay. And they're constantly competing. So it's like the cartoons you saw when you were a kid, devils on one shoulder and angels on the other. Swedenborg says that's exactly what's going on. And the one
It's
you
all
feed
about
the most.
choices, isn't
Yes.
it? It's all
Yes.
about then what choices we make, because that I
Right.
think to me would be symbolic, because Earth is where we get to exercise free will and choice, whether we actually realize it or not, right? We do.
Right.
So
Right.
every moment in life is a choice. What choice am I making in this moment? Does it serve the higher good, or does it serve, is it more self-serving? And there has to be the balance, you see, and that's the thing, because this is what I call riding the rim. What we're talking about here is exactly two sides of the same coin, but the coin has the third side. So when we understand that there's a time where you've got to take care of yourself, and there's a time where you give to the masses, kind of thing, right? There's a time where you allow, and there's a time where you step back. So there's always that balance within two things, so it doesn't become all consuming. I mean, you can have love and light until the cows come home and sing whatever it is to the spiritual or heavenly realms. But if you haven't understood how to process that within the physicalness of your being, it's irrelevant. So we have to actually put boundaries. We have to have a certain amount of spiritual um, invisible, right, belief, because spirit is all about believing in the invisible, whatever that is for you. You'll feel it in your emotions, you'll have it in your thoughts, and you'll manifest it in your being physically and in your environment. So it's all about, I think, understanding how everything works together. There's not just one, never just one. We have to understand the balance of things, because Earth is about extremes. We have to understand that the extreme of the extremes exists here. Just look around us. My God, look around us. Look at the war. Look at the torture. Look at the horrific things people do to each other and to defenseless animals and creatures on the one side. But then look at the extent others go to be kind and take care of others. You know what I'm saying? So there's a time to take care of yourself, and there's a time to take care of others. If you're not taking care of yourself, you cannot take care of others in the long term. So, if your spirit is hollow and full of pain and torment, how do you then show others what peace is? You've got to find peace within yourself first. And we will see that the peaceful soul has always experienced much torment. It's only through torment you find your peace. And here's the dichotomy. So we must realize the value in both. That my pain has taught me, that's a good thing. Your pain is never there to keep you suffering. It's there to take you to a deeper level of awareness. And that is what I say, like when we see the Mace and stuff like that, it helps people break through those subconscious blockages, call them that, right? And then it gives them opportunity to move through that. But in order to do that, you have to keep yourself in that connected space.
Well, your mind is always going to be a battlefield because, like Swedenborg says, you got two positive angels with you, two guardian angels, and two negative demons, and they're always see the negative ones will speak in English negative. The positive ones usually they speak in feelings feelings and intuition. So you go to do something bad and you get a feeling, well, that's not right. Okay. So there's a battle going on constantly. Where you put your attention, your energy goes with it.
Sure.
Okay?
Choices.
So you got this battle going on, and you got the negative ones telling them, yeah, go attack that person or call them scum or do this or do something bad. You don't have to listen to that. Okay. Where you put your attention, if you put your attention on the bad, then you're feeding the bad. Okay. So Sherry Sweeney, my co-author in where's this book here, she come up with something called the That's a Lie program. So she was hearing voices when she was a young woman too. And she came up with a program that she was a computer programmer. She came up with a program that basically said, you know, when the negative thought comes in, she would tell it that's a lie. Now there's 3 sections. It goes on my website at jerrymarzinsky.com. Go to articles, and you can get this program. It's free. Okay, it's called the That's a Lie program, and there's like 3 sections. She actually worked her way out of schizophrenia with that program alone, but it works great for obsessive compulsive ideas and negative thoughts that are flooding into your head. Okay? And what it does is it negates the negative thought, because what these voices, they're consummate liars. These negative entities, they're consummate liars. They don't care what they tell you as long as it upsets you. You know, and they have access to your memory. Okay? So they can pull up every rotten thing you've ever done, and they can hammer on that or themes of that, because they're non-physical. Your memory is non-physical. Your spirit is non-physical. So Swedenborg talks about, it gets interesting. See, he says that a lot of the times when these spirits enter a person, they don't even know that they're in another person. They think that person's memory belongs to them. Okay? Yeah. He said it gets dangerous when they realize that they're with another person, because as soon as they understand that, then they go to destroy that person. They hate us.
Yeah. And I'm sure because they can't actually, they're too low vibrating to have their own bodies. So they've got to suck onto already existing bodies and hitchhike. And as you say, you know, we've understood that a lot of this stuff happens from when kids are young already. And, you know, if for those of you who listen to the satanic ritual abuse survivors who speak about how literally some of these entities, depending, you know, are literally implanted into these kids. So these high-level politicians and stuff we're seeing have all had that kind of stuff go down.
Infested. Most of them are infested.
Yeah.
So what's
interesting? They're all about power, and they're all about power, control,
greed.
Greed. Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely.
So what makes it very difficult is that the voices of those entities sound just like your regular thoughts. Okay. And when the prisoners asked them, "Who are you? What are you?" they would say, "We are you." So they want you to believe that that negative voice you hear in your head is not separate from you, but is who you are. And if they can get you to believe that their voice is you, which is what they're after, then they got you. You know?
Exactly.
But most schizophrenics realize something is wrong. They don't know quite what it is, and they will, to some degree, fight back against the takeover of these voices, because that's basically what they're trying to do, is take these people over so they have a clone that can go do whatever they want them to do. You know, and I've seen a handful of these people that were completely taken over. They're very dangerous.
Yeah, no, I believe absolutely. I was trying to think of the movie specifically where I've spoken about it before. This guy in prison, he has that from when the age of 4. He has this entity, and he of course becomes a very violent person who ends up in jail and has to go down the route of going down the electric chair. And he was very happy when he was electrocuted, because that was the greatest source of pain. That was the last bit of pain that this entity was going to be extracting from his body. And it was so, it made such a lot of sense. Gosh, I can't remember the name. I'll think about it. I have spoken about it before, actually, and I know some of you might might know what I'm speaking about, but sorry. But yeah, it makes a lot of, it makes a lot of sense. And, and Jerry, the bottom line is that, yes, and I think anyone also, people that I've worked with, it's like they'll be fine, but generally been struggling with stuff as well. And then suddenly one day they'll wake up and they'll know that thought wasn't theirs. It might even start with intrusive thoughts. And that's also what Schizophrenia has spoken about.
Right.
And then you start battling, and then that thought carries on, and all you do is give it, and think about what you're doing. You're giving that thought or that strange voice a negative attention. It drains your energy just by giving it that negative attention, and that's what it wants. So the objective is that when you hear stuff like that, play sound, music that will work for you. Get yourself in a happy space, because in that positive vibration,
it's not coming from you. That's a big thing you have to understand. Those negative thoughts aren't coming from you.
Which is why you need to shift your vibration so that it can't reach you. Absolutely.
Yes. And once you realize it's not coming from you, that's a huge breakthrough.
Yeah, exactly.
Because they want you to believe that those thoughts belong to you and they are who you are. Once they do that, they got you. They got you hooked like a fish on a line, because now they're controlling you. Once you believe that you are them. Well, I had one prisoner who I worked with for about 6 months. We finally got rid of the voices. And at the moment they left, they screamed, and he almost fell out of the chair. He was in shock. Okay. And he goes, first thing he said was, the silence is deafening. Okay. Because he had been hearing these voices for decades. He used to be a real rich guy on Wall Street, making, 6-figure money. He went from there to eating out of trash cans in New York City. And he preferred that. His voices preferred that. They would rather have it that way, than any other way. And what was interesting, his wife didn't know that. He hid the voices from his wife, and he would go out to the garage and talk to them. Okay. And then his wife, when she caught him, he would say, "Oh, I'm just talking to myself." And the voices hated his wife, and he wasn't real thrilled about her either. Finally, she goes, I want a divorce. And when he was happy about it, she saw that, and she went ballistic, and she just took everything he had, took the house, his money, everything. And he ended up living out of trash cans in New York City. Okay? Wow. So people are good about hiding these things. The voices don't want them talking to anybody about the voices. And
yeah,
it doesn't benefit them. They look what they do. They talk to their friends, and the friends go, "Well, you're crazy. I don't want to be around you." So they lose their friends. The voices actually jump in there and torment them for telling them about the voices. So they want it to be a very quiet thing, that they're just, and they tell the person, stay by yourself, stay isolated, don't bother with anybody. That way they have complete access to the person with no interference. So anybody who tries to help the schizophrenic becomes an automatic enemy of the voices.
Exactly. Wow, Jerry, another great conversation with lots of always interesting information. I'm just anybody who wants to get hold of Jerry, you can find his details in the description area. I'm just going to pop up your little banner here again, so to pop up your website. But I'm wondering if there's anything that you maybe want to close off, round off, wrap up with, and if there's any way people can get a hold of you.
Yeah, they can get a hold of me through my website at jerrymarzinsky.com. Also, there's a place there where they can sign up for Mace sessions to clean out the subconscious stuff that's been driving them crazy over all the years. Mace works
Absolutely.
better than any other psychotherapy I've ever seen. It's an energetic psychotherapy.
It is. It's very good. I would highly recommend it. So I think you guys are having great results with that as well. So anyone feels the urge to check it out, you can get a hold of Jerry on his website on the banner below, www.jerrymarzinsky.com. Thank you, Jerry. I always
You're
appreciate you. And I'll see you back in a month's time. Thank you, everybody, for joining us on this lovely Saturday. Take care of yourselves all. Yep, there's Jerry's website for any of you who might have missed it. And I'll see you guys back on Monday next week. Take it easy. God bless you all, everybody. Stay cool, yeah? Mwah. If this broke something open, if you recognized yourself in the testimony, if your body responded before your mind understood, the next step isn't more information. It's pattern work. Decode what your nervous system built to survive. Dismantle the story that keeps it running. Reorganize through the body and choose from the person you're becoming, not from the pattern that formed when you were too small to choose. That's Solutions. Link below. The body is the record. Let's listen.